Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Pod.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party. On today's show we feel the need for speed as we enter the danger zone to review Top Gun Maverick. I'm Dallas King, callsign Timbits, and with me as always is the goose to my Maverick, Lee Hutchison, callsign Marathon. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks. And I feel glad that there's some Star Trek representation in Top Gun Maverick, so I feel like that my weekly mention of Star Trek somehow tenuously in these conversations is definitely going to be warranted this episode.
Oh, absolutely. So originally meant to launch, I think, all the way back in 2020, Top Gun Maverick is the 36-year-old sequel to Top Gun, starring Pete Maverick Mitchell as the aviator who returns to the Top Gun Academy to train up a roster of new pilots for their most dangerous mission yet. A task complicated by one of the pilots being the son of his fallen comrade, Goose. Directed by Joseph Kosinski, it stars Tom Cruise, Jennifer Connelly, Glenn Powell, Miles Teller, and Val Kilmer, and with possibly one of the greatest film credits of the year, if not the decade, music by Harold Faltermeyer, Lady Gaga, and Hans Zimmer. So, Lee, Top Gun. I believe that you actually only saw Top Gun for the very first time, about 2 days before going to see this one? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Just one of those that passed you by, did it?
Yeah, I'd never felt quite motivated to see it, and I think it's one of these films that I don't ever recall sort of seeing on a streaming platform to add to like a watch list to ever feel guilty about it. So yeah, I just sort of never got round to it. So I picked up a copy of it in 4K on digital last week and sat down to watch it. And as someone that was born in 1987, my kind of main thought coming away from watching the film was, I wonder if the date this got released in the UK kind of timed with when I was conceived, because that is quite an erotic charged movie for the 80s, and I can imagine lots of couples going to that and then feeling the need, I guess. It was a pretty enjoyable film. I would have watched it and probably never thought that it needed a sequel or anything like that, but yeah, it was a solid enough entertaining evening, a real throwback to 80s style movie making, in particular their use of music and repetitive use of music. It was pretty enjoyable movie, and yeah, I can imagine it really blowing people's minds back in the 80s.
Well, there was the stories of the Navy would be camped out in the cinema auditoriums afterwards, getting people to sign up to join. Apparently, recruitment went up 500% off the back of this one. I expect that the film also probably had another effect on a lot of people, given the I can't even say subtle homoerotic undertones of the film. Given the constant talk of men getting erections while talking about planes, admirals talking about wanting butts, the beach volleyball scene, of course. I mean, would you have seen like Hot Shots and Hot Shots Part 2 before? I guess you would have seen them if you've seen them before Top Gun. I wonder how seeing a spoof before the actual film that was inspired by, would that affect your viewing?
I would love to say, but I have seen neither of them too.
Well, Sean, if you're listening, there's plenty more material to be mined for missing frames. So, I mean, I might have actually even seen Hot Shots before Top Gun. I can't remember. Could have done. But, I mean, that's like, I just remember sort of rewatching Top Gun before going to see this one. I remember just there's like the initial scene where the little guy who's, making sure the planes get off does that little kick of like, yes, we got one off the thing, and then how that in Hot Shots that turned into like a 30-second long bit where a guy goes through in more elaborate dance moves, somersaults, and all that sort of thing. So I mean, it's easy to see how a film like that can open itself up for parody, but I think it's safe to say that Top Gun Maverick plays it pretty straight. Actually, even straighter than Top Gun Maverick. It's certainly it's less homoerotic than the original. I mean, so were you looking forward to Top Gun Maverick? I mean, you enjoyed Top Gun, but I'm assuming it must have been on your radar before you decided to sit down and watch the original.
Eh, not overly. Like the trailers hadn't done too much for me personally. I had no real connection to it. I think what had me excited was it's hard to bet against Tom Cruise. Like you look at his batting average, even with the Mummy taken into account, and it's pretty high. He is dependable for these sorts of things. I didn't think he would be back for some sort of shameless cash grab. It just wasn't something that I was particularly excited for or interested in. But a lot of the buzz and positive word of mouth came out, certainly got my attention, and I decided that it was definitely worth catching in IMAX opening weekend.
Yeah, this is a man who was, back to the movies. There he was with his mask on, going to see Tenet, always about the theatrical experience. And, he's solid, dependable, and, probably the second most shocking film fact that I discovered this week was that Tom Cruise, well, until this weekend, had never had a box office opening over $100 million. The other fact being that Laura Dern was apparently only 23 when she filmed Jurassic Park.
Also stunned by that.
It does make total sense, but just in my head when I was watching it, I just assumed that she was like probably 30s and like on a peer level with Alan Grant as opposed to being like a student. I don't know. Weird. But hey, you live and learn with all these things. So yeah, it does seem weird, doesn't it, that Tom Cruise never had. I mean, I would have thought that one of the Mission Impossibles would have done it by now, but apparently not. But I think it's probably safe to say he's probably going to have two in a row once Mission Impossible Fallout comes. Not Mission Impossible Fallout. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 comes out. Do you think he's on a roll now?
Yeah, of course. I was also stunned by that because you think surely the Mission Impossible films must have done that. But yeah, I think the positive that you can take away from Top Gun Maverick is the box office is clearly healing. Before COVID, 100 million opening weekend felt like the norm for a lot of films like this, and it's taken quite a long time for that to become quite consistent again. But it feels like we're on a roll just now.
Absolutely, and long may it continue. And you talked about him being a person all about the theatrical experience. I think many people will probably have got the Mission Impossible trailer just before the start of Top Gun Maverick. Apparently, some cinemas in America got like a heartfelt "thank you for coming to the cinema" plea from Tom Cruise, which they may have seen after his ex-wife Nicole Kidman's AMC commercial. But I mean, the bit where he jumps off a bike off the top of a cliff and sort of basically sort of soaring to his potential demise, but of course he'll survive. It's Ethan Hunt at this point. It's they call themselves the Mission Impossible films, but they always seem to manage to pull it off. But this is a man who clearly loves the theatrical experience, wants it to be an experience for audiences, and was willing to do everything he can in order to make sure that it's the best possible experience for audiences. And I think you can really see that in this film. I know that I don't think from the small amounts that I was able to glean from a couple of comments on social media, I'm not sure if you were completely taken by the film, but I think you were still impressed at his willingness to put himself and from the looks of it, the rest of his cast through the paces in order to deliver the best possible experience.
Yeah, definitely. I was a bit mixed on the film, but in terms of the drama and the plot, I'd kind of seen it all before. It didn't sort of really click with me. But what I really liked, and I mean this in not the Scorsese way, but it made me think of like a theme park ride that I was just every time they were up in the air. Like I knew, and I just knowing that it was all shot in IMAX, that it was shot for real, it wasn't sort of CGI or augmented or anything like that. Like I was just really impressed by it. You're not sitting there thinking like, oh, that defies the laws of physics or that's not possible. You're just sitting there like just really impressed with like the technical filmmaking of it, and maybe that's the one thing that I just have where, I really admire the film and so much that goes on with it, but ultimately it's not one of these films where I think, oh, it's a, a fantastic film, all perfectly put together. I enjoyed the ride and the adventure of it all, but ultimately there are better films out there, films that connect on a bit more of an emotional level with me, but I can't argue with the making of the film, which is to be admired.
Yeah, I mean the aviation scenes are just spectacular to watch, and I think for me going into the third act with the final mission, which they do, you really got a sort of genuine sense of the stakes involved. That not everyone, like he says towards the start of the film, not everyone's coming back from this, and having we have all watched a lot of movies, and I'm sure that we all had opinions on who was going to survive, who was going to do potentially sacrifice themselves to save someone else, all this kind of stuff. We probably had in our head, okay, this is definitely going down a certain route. Whether it does that or not, I'm not going to spoil it or not, but I think it was the fact that, like you say, it was filmed in IMAX, filmed with cameras. There's a couple of featurettes out there you can watch about the boot camp that all the young pilots went on, and having to, basically get their own cameras working and stuff in the cockpits and stuff like this. I mean, you can tell that they are in those planes. Probably not actually flying them. Well, maybe Tom Cruise might have actually. He's probably still wouldn't have been allowed to do that. He did fly the plane at the end, though. I'm apparently told. Apparently, it's his own plane because he just buys one and tinkers around with it. But you could see the G-force on their face. You could feel that. I mean, are you going to be going back? I think you watched it in IMAX. And are you going to be going to watch it in 4DX to get that pure theme park ride?
I have heard it is a really good 4DX experience, and I find myself with quite a quiet Jubilee weekend coming up. So there is the temptation to maybe go see my second ever 4DX movie. Like,
Ooh, what was
I
the
think
first?
it was The Last Jedi. I went to see that on Boxing Day that year, and so I'm tempted to give it a go and so on. I think I've heard positive things about it from some people I trust. So yeah, it could be tempted.
Yeah, no, I never try to watch a film for the first time on 4DX. I find it just a bit of a distraction. And I mean, we discussed it on the Sonic the Hedgehog 2 one, which was the only one that fit into the lunchtime thing. So I was forced to watch that, and I was glad I didn't have my lunch. But I think this type of film will lend itself to being more effective in what is kind of just like a gimmicky sort of, let's charge everyone a few extra quid to go to the cinema and shake them around in their seat and blast jets of air and water and stuff at them. But I think I probably will give it a go. Like you say, there's nothing else much out this Jubilee weekend, unless I want to watch a documentary on the Queen in the cinema. And quite frankly, no, I'll give that a miss. So yeah, I'm going to give it another go. But like you say, you weren't completely won over by the story. And I'm getting and the emotion of it. So I guess you weren't completely bought into Maverick's quest for redemption, and he wasn't able to save his wingman, but maybe he might be able to save Goose's son Rooster, aka Miles Teller, sporting a wonderful tash, spitting image of his cinematic old man. The only worry I have about the mustache is if it makes people think that they might be able to pull it off from November. I have a feeling that it's going to potentially be. Are they trying to bring it back? I don't know. Because you had an issue with the mustache, didn't you?
I did. That was my one thing. Like, I could buy in that his son decided he wanted to become like a plane pilot. Yeah, okay, I can get into that, and I can bet against the odds that he also achieved, being one of that 1% to get into Top Gun. But I just didn't buy into the fact that his son, like 36 years later, would have the same exact mustache. Like, that was just the one bit for me where I was like, I don't buy it.
Yeah, no, it was a nice tribute, and I think you had to have that. Otherwise, you wouldn't needed that to at least you needed to distinguish between him and all the other pilots. Sometime, I mean, did any of the pilots stand out? I mean, I think they say there's around about sort of 12 pilots, but I think there's only really about sort of 6 to 8 get a reasonable amount of screen time. I mean, I was shocked to find on second viewing that Manny Jacinto from The Good Place was one of the pilots, but I think appeared on like the screen at the very beginning when it shows the roster of them, and then it highlights Miles Teller, and then I honestly couldn't pick him out anywhere else in the film. So I mean, I guess there are always casualties in this kind of thing, but I mean, did anyone? I mean, I'm guessing maybe aside of like Hangman sort of stand out to you.
Yeah, Hangman was good. I think my problem was like when you watch the first one, it's not the most diverse cast in the world, and I think they improve upon that somewhat in this. But yeah, not many of them get anything overly meaningful to do. I did like Hangman had a bit of a kind of charm to him and that, but the rest just sort of felt a little bit underserved compared to the rest. I did enjoy sort of John Hamm as sort of the the straight faced was it Cyclone, like he's just he's always just that very much that cliche of Maverick, and I enjoyed that kind of a bit, but I didn't think the characters were overly well developed personally.
No, I think a lot of them were sketches of archetypes and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, Ed Harris sort of turns up at the beginning to be the sort of grizzled bald guy, because I think James Tolkien from the original is probably in his 90s and stuff now. So, but always nice to see Ed Harris and then John Hamm. Yeah, unfortunately, before the film, I saw a meme, and I couldn't get it out of my head now. Whenever I see him, and it was a bit that was always in the trailers, and it was someone who basically spoofed Airplane, and it's like the line where Cyclone goes. You've been brought back to the Navy. You've still got something you can offer the Navy. What that is, I can't imagine. And then it's just cuts to Leslie Nielsen going, "It's a American institution with pilots and boats, but that's not important right now." So, he was a good foil for that. Having to do all that stuff. You've got like Phoenix and stuff like this. You got female ones. You got a few of color and stuff. But then, I mean, the only real sort of main character probably in this is Jennifer Connelly's Penny, who was just Penny up until the very end of the film, and then I realized in the credits that she was Penny Benjamin, a la made an illegal pass at Five Towers and an Admiral's daughter, Penny Benjamin. So they brought that back full circle, which was great to see for me. I mean, you could obviously it was hinting that they had history, but I just didn't realize exactly how much history they had until the end credits. But I mean, what did you make of Jennifer Connelly in this? I mean, I was initially struggling to get past the fact of how good she looks, but yeah, that was.
Yeah, again, I come back to it. She felt very underserved. Like I just didn't. If the plot line just didn't have much to do or go anywhere. They had their odd little flirtation and guidance. I think it would have been easier if they just kept it like without the romance, and there she is as sort of just like someone that he can kind of go to and have a conversation. Like I think that time could have been better spent on perhaps some of these Top Gun cadets. I think that would have been a better use of the time than sort of just this kind of half fleshed out romance,
and rather chaste romance as well. You didn't get the full on 80s sort of saxophone accompanied sex scene. It was just a little bit of a kiss on the kitchen table, and then we'll just have a chat, a post-coital chat under the covers.
I think there's a bit where she just lays down like horizontally, and you're sort of thinking like, okay, that's a very 80s thing with his face kind of coming in above. Like that bit I certainly stood out as a tribute to 80s filmmaking.
Yeah, and then I did notice on the second time, all those scenes were sort of soundtracked by the Lady Gaga song, which was then sort of worked into the score by Zimmer and stuff like that as well. She gets the song at the end again with the 80s style, the shots of everyone sort of like almost turning to the camera and smiling cheesily with the sunglasses on. Do you think that, this is bringing back big old school action blockbuster filmmaking? Could Lady Gaga's song see the return of the soundtrack tie-in? Obviously the king of that in the late 90s was Will Smith. And we had like the Jamiroquai's Deeper Underground from Godzilla, Wild Wild West. You had all the Aerosmith's Don't Want to Miss a Thing. I miss that from a summer blockbuster. Is it time that we brought this back? I know that the charts work in a completely different way now to when I was a kid, where in order for the Bryan Adams to be number one, people had to go out and buy the cassette or the CD single for 17, 18 weeks in a row. Obviously now it's all streaming and all that sort of nonsense. But, would you like to see return to that kind of thing?
Yeah, because I remembered as a kid, like I wasn't so much into like rock music or popular music. I was into really like buying soundtracks, and yeah, there's just something about it that's enjoyable. I always liked it when, back in the day where you could maybe see a film once and perhaps be a long time before you got the chance to see it again. You know, it was always kind of like frustrating. You're always just looking for like little nibbits or things. And I always remembered like the Jewel of the Fates music video, and that was always on like the sort of the music channels at the time, like MTV, The Box, etc. And
it does feel weird, doesn't it, that Jewel of the Fates got a music video?
Yeah, I think Across the Stars and Jewel of the Fates got one, but they weren't in heavy rotation like that one was. But I quite enjoyed it because you would always get like a little bit of like the film footage, and it was always a good chance to sort of see a film you really liked or were excited to see, or a film that you'd seen but you were kind of desperate to get some sort of the clips again, and you're sitting there waiting for hours to see the music video. Like I've got really good memories of that sort of stuff.
Of course, one must always be careful of purchasing a film soundtrack before the film has come out, as The Phantom Menace did have the infamous Qui-Gon's noble end and Qui-Gon's funeral on the back of it. So always be careful out there, kids. So, I mean, this film, 36 years after the original, like you said, no one was probably ever really screaming out for a sequel to Top Gun. The story was kind of there. He'd failed goose. He was living in the shadow of his old man, but he was able to become his own version of himself and save the day. He was able to become Iceman's, wingman and stuff like that. Where would this one rank for you in terms of the legacy quills that we've had recently? And we've had a lot of Star Wars ones. We've had sort of Mad Max Fury Road, Blade Runner 2049. Where does it sort of fall for you? And I mean, since it was, I guess, rather fresh in the mind, how did the sort of callbacks and stuff like that sit for you? Because I mean, as enjoyable as a film is, I think it's clear to see it does go down the lines of Force Awakens, of several plot points are repeated or disguised in some way, but are kind of almost carbon copies of the original.
Yeah, it didn't bother me too much, to be honest. I mean, it's one of those ones, like the film had a pretty, relatively low bar to vault and so on for me, and it certainly did that. I mean, yeah, they stood out quite a bit, even down to some of like the uses of music, fonts. As you say, there was quite a bit of repetition here and there.
I think actually, if you just walked into the cinema and missed the Joseph Kosinski directed bit, you could be mistaken for thinking that they've just put on the original film for the first 5 minutes. It's like, am I watching? I mean, I'm sure that there's a reason that they wanted to do that. I mean, it's slightly better cinematography. They've clearly got better cameras and stuff like that. But yeah, it is kind of setting it up that we are going down the same route, but we're gonna do things slightly differently.
Yeah, and it was one of those things, it didn't bother me that much. Sometimes if it's like a franchise that I'm really interested in, I'm wanting to see something new, or I'm vested in that. That wasn't obviously the case with this film. It just had to be enjoyable for me. And, some of the references were just a little bit heavy-handed, and obviously being fresh, I was sat next to someone that just, I think they loved every single callback or mention, and she turned up wearing like the leather jacket with the exact replica patches that Tom Cruise's character has in the film, and they were like pointing at the screen quite a bit to their partner. They were getting emotional, gasping at parts, and as much as I want to sneer at things like that, sometimes it's like, the person's enjoying themselves. It's a big blockbuster movie. I've been there before with certain franchises and stuff. So, knock yourself out and so on. I think, this compared to, say, a Marvel movie where there's just endless cycles of doing that all the time. And even with Star Wars, you're like, oh, well, there's going to be another one of these in a few years. If people come away and enjoy themselves and feel that a film that they've loved and grown up with has been paid respect to, they've got it feels like a good sequel to that, then, who am I to sneer too much? It's really no bother to me, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Let people enjoy what it is. I mean, what sort of makeup was your audience? Because when I saw it on, it would have been sort of like early Friday evening. It was quite a mix. It was quite a lot of older, sort of couple like people in the like 50s, 60s, sort of younger. It was quite a broad spectrum of people. So it's interesting to see, that it's clearly targeting fans of the original. It's bringing in some new people, and it looked like some of the silver screeners were coming back for one of their first cinema trips in a long, long time. So, I mean, clearly the box office numbers are proving that they've done a great job on the marketing, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I might even be able to trump you on this one. I had a very diverse crowd at the IMAX in a range of ages. I had a newborn baby that was there, and I was kind of reassured. Most screenings I'd be terrified about something like that, but I thought, the good thing is it's an IMAX screen, so it's going to get drowned out the whole time, and it pretty much nearly was, so I was quite
Oh,
happy.
well, that's good. That's good. One thing I did notice about this film was, and I don't know if this was the case during the script process or the filming process or even the 2 years of post production editing, but the bad guys, well, the nominal bad guys, or bad country that is building this nuclear reactor base, are never mentioned explicitly on screen. It's just like, we've got this target, we need it destroyed. It never signposts any particular country that they're flying into or out of. What did you make of the decision to keep the bad guys fairly nondescript? It could be anyone, given obviously the current situations that the world is finding itself in.
As someone that's a big 24 fan, I'm used to nondescript countries and so on. I mean, you could kind of take it or leave it who it was meant to be and so on. It could be Russia, it could be Iran, I mean, you're used to these kind of nondescript countries, and I think it would have maybe, I don't know, it did feel sort of like it was kind of, you were going up against some sort of just boogie person, really.
It could have been a Bond villain. That's what I thought. It's I'm building this underground nuclear reactor base in the crater of a mountain. It's very Bondian. I thought, if Bondian is a word, I don't know. Okay,
Bondian
that's
is a
fine.
word, yeah. Yeah, I think that needed a little bit fleshed out. But the reality is, I mean, for these people, they just go on a mission, don't they? I mean, you think of
Just
things like
following
Zero Dark
orders.
Thirty, like, yeah, they have to go kill Osama bin Laden, but it's all about the mission. It could be anyone that they're going after. It's not overly important to them. They're just, they're the meat, as it were. The more political decisions, and those are perhaps made for the higher up. So yeah, it wasn't my kind of personal preference really for something like this, but I thought it was interesting, kind of nevertheless, the option that they took.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess sort of one sort of last sort of thing we need to discuss. We discussed him on the A24 project with the documentary. We got Val Kilmer back on the big screen. Iceman returns. Initially only over text message, but then he does get one sort of great scene in the middle of the movie. How did you feel about the return of Iceman and Val Kilmer, and how do you think were you pleased with the way that the film sort of handled its return?
A little bit of both. I mean, we spoke about when we reviewed Val that I found it quite emotional. Just the kind of sadness that you felt for him, that he had lost his voice, and the experience he's gone on in the past few years. And I like that they didn't shy away from it, that he'd kind of lost his voice. I thought that was really tastefully done. I mean, we know that he's got kind of throat cancer, but I just felt it was a little on the nose, and dare I say, it was sort of like walking on someone's grave that's not dead yet, to sort of, a little spoiler, like he dies of cancer like about two scenes later and so on. And, it's quite quick turnaround really, I thought. But I just thought that was kind of like, oh, he does have cancer in real life, and would I kill someone that had that in real life in a film? I just thought that was a little odd.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, could it have? Yeah, potentially. Did you need that funeral scene in it? Probably not. Although, not wanting to get into too much into spoiler territory, but I was convinced up until sort of going into the press screening, having watched the trailer on pretty much every movie for the past 6 months, that only like a week before I suddenly thought, are they pulling a Hereditary with this trailer? It's like, why is Jennifer Connelly at a military funeral? Because I didn't know. I didn't know what her character's relation was at the point. But it's like, she would only be there if she was with Tom. But then, is that scene of Tom within a thing? Is that maybe from like a flashback to Goose's funeral? Are they setting us up for the fact that Tom Cruise's Maverick dies, and then that's how it's going to be at the end? I had all these theories going into it, but whether or not that happens or not, I'm not going to spoil it. But I did wonder if they were setting us up for that. But no, it turned out to be related to Kilmer's character. I thought it was. I think they handled it probably. I think that scene as well as they could. Obviously, in the documentary that we did for A24, it was narrated by his son. So I was wondering if he was having trouble with his voice at that point. Would he be sort of essentially dubbed in, with his son trying to recreate his voice, or would they have used like some old footage and sort of cobbled it together to recreate his voice if he was having trouble? But I'm kind of glad that they did it the way they did, and it added an extra emotional heft to that scene, which I thought was there. And it was great to see him sort of be able to get a few sentences out at the end with the who's the better pilot, and then that lovely moment where Cruise goes, "Oh, this is a nice moment, let's not ruin it," So
yeah, exactly.
So I mean, Tom Cruise is champion of cinema. He has had his ups and downs in the time. It seems people are coming back around to him, certainly as a movie star. Maybe he's always going to be maybe slightly out there for some people in terms of Scientology and his rather intenseness in public situations. But I mean, do we have anyone else like Tom Cruise at the moment, really, in terms of, is he the last action hero, so to speak?
He's certainly pushing it. He really leans and takes pride in his production aspect of his films. I mean, you think back to his rant that he had on the set of Mission Impossible. I mean, he raises the standards of every single person around him. So many actors are essentially actors for hire. I'm not saying that they're not passionate about their films, but they know their role and part in it. And so many of these things are huge machines where ultimately the actor, much like the director in cases, doesn't have that significant power. I think Tom Cruise has earned that power, and quite rightly so. And you can see how he raises the standards. I mean, you could watch a Top Gun with nearly any other actor in the world, and so much of that would be fake CGI, and we'd be taken out of it. But with that, Tom Cruise has the power to make it as real as possible.
To bring in a wrestling reference, I guess you've got Star Trek reference. I'm going to bring in a wrestling reference. Sheamus and Cesaro at one point were a tag team called The Bar because they consider themselves to be The Bar. I would consider Tom Cruise probably to be The Bar in sort of blockbuster filmmaking at the moment. Obviously, the only other real sort of franchise which is probably competing with him in the Mission Impossible ones at the moment is the Fast and Furious films. And we can see how quickly, things can turn there. Looks like The Rock was right all along. So it's going to be interesting to see how they come about, and the fast 10 your seatbelts and fasten your seatbelts again when they come out. But I mean, I can't remember the timeline of it, but I guess would Top Gun Maverick have come out in an ideal world? Would it have come out before the last Fast and Furious? Because I know that maybe Tom Cruise was maybe slightly kicking himself that he didn't get into space first, and it certainly does look like he's in the upper regions of the atmosphere in his sort of stealth jet in the opening scene. I mean, that is kind of like Is there not something that he was planning to film an entire film in space, or certainly in orbit or something?
Yeah, I think he is aiming to do that, or it is in pre-production still at this stage. But yeah, that's definitely happening.
And it's just, I guess, the world that we're living in, and the credibility of Tom Cruise, that you read something like that and go, yeah, no, that seems about right. Yeah, of course he would. And who's going to stop him? If they can't stop him, motorcycling off a cliff with just a parachute on his back, then of course they're going to send him up into space. So, yeah, I think for me, Top Gun Maverick is up there with, I think it's better than the original. I think looking back on the original, there's a lot of fondness for it for being from that particular time in the 80s, but as an overall movie, I'd probably rate it about 3 stars. But this one, I think, is a significant improvement on it in terms of just the sheer spectacle of it. So, yeah. And, feeding into that with Mad Max Fury Road, Blade Runner 2049, I think there should be like a memorandum written into Hollywood where you can only make a sequel to a film as long as 30 years have passed. Everyone was critical, or maybe we just need a bit more distance, because everyone criticized the prequels for the Star Wars movies. There was actually weirdly only 16 years between Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace. It seemed like longer, but it wasn't. And
God, yeah.
With Obi-Wan coming out and stuff like that, people are saying, oh, actually, no, the prequels, actually, they weren't that bad. The audience for them have now grown up, and they're loving the fact that they're getting to see these characters again. So, yeah, maybe all we need is a bit of time. And speaking of time, we're not going to have an episode next week because we're going to be waiting. Life Finds a Way. It's another Legacy Quill. It's the ending of the second Legacy Quill series, I guess. Jurassic World Dominion. Yes, it's all going to come to an end. They're bringing back a slightly older Laura Dern, who's, I guess, still got a quite considerable age gap between her and Sam Neill and Jeff Goldblum as well. They're all back, along with Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard for the final installment. Now, I was, a big fan of Jurassic World, even though it was pretty much just beat for beat the original film again. I did not like the second one at all, so I guess we'll have to see what happens with this one. Are your expectations high, or are you just like, it's on that weekend and it's on IMAX? Sure, I'll go watch it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, I have a strong relationship with the Jurassic Park films from growing up with them. I did enjoy Jurassic World, but it wasn't really. I've only watched Fallen Kingdom once, but I will rewatch it before then. But yeah, we'll kind of see how it goes and so on. I mean, yeah, it's something to see. It's content to devour.
So will it be roarsome, or should they remain extinct? We'll find out. But in the meantime, you'll be able to check us out. We'll have a new episode of the A24 Project coming very soon, as we are reviewing Men. Not all men, but Alex Garland's Men. We'll see you then. Bye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd